Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the overview of SBA and the University of Minnesota Business Law Unemployment for Small Business session. My name is Michael Waldegarima. I am the Program Support Assistant with the Minnesota District Office of the SBA. During the presentation, we ask all the attendees to have their audio and video muted. We also ask that you share any questions by typing them into the chat bubble on the control panel at the bottom of your screen. For those of you who may be struggling to access the slides on Teams, we'll be announcing the slide transitions for you to follow along with the slides that were emailed to you earlier today. I would now like to present Emily Buchholz. Emily?
All right. Hi, welcome everyone. We are delighted to have you all on the call with us today. My name is Emily Buchholz. I'm the Executive Director Institute at the University of Minnesota Law School. The biggest piece of what I do there is to teach and run the business law clinic. We do work with small businesses on a variety of transaction-based matters. I will type my email address in the chat bar in just a moment. If you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out. I am also a licensed business attorney and have worked for many years with small businesses and nonprofits and startups, and it's just a wonderful practice area. So I am thrilled that we were able to partner with the Small Business Administration this summer. This is actually one of a series of talks that we've done together. In June, we did a talk on insurance claims. We also did a talk on lease issues. Both of those were also recorded and have been uploaded to YouTube. So if you're interested and you didn't get a chance to join us on those days, you can search for UMN Law on YouTube and find them that way. Or you can go to the Corporate Institute webpage and click through to find them. I'll put both of those in the chat bar as well in just a moment. And then next week on Wednesday, July 22nd, from 3 to 4 p.m., we're going to do another talk on contract performance issues and force majeure clauses. Both of those topics sound, kind of legal heavy. The idea just being if two parties enter into an agreement and one party doesn't or can't do what they said they were going to do, what happens next? So that will be our talk for next week. You can sign up on Eventbrite if you'd like to join us next Wednesday, July 22nd from 3 to 4 p.m. Let's see. So I need to kind of frame the discussion before we get into the meat of it and let you all know that this is general information. It's often really helpful. It's an excellent place to start, but it's not the same thing as specific legal advice. So for those of you who have specific questions related to your situation, really there's just no substitute for engaging with an attorney who can represent you, who can learn all of the nuances and context of your specific situation and give you some actual guidance about what to do or what to expect. So this is in the camp of general information versus specific legal advice. I just want to be really clear about that up front. I will moderate the conversation. So when you have questions, I'd like you to put them in the chat bar. As Michael mentioned, I might respond to you directly. I might interrupt the speakers and see if they want to respond. And we might save some of those questions for the end. So don't worry, I expect and hope we'll be able to get to everyone's questions. Just go ahead and put them in the chat bar when you have them. All right, so without further ado, I'm excited to introduce our panelists today. First, we have Areti Georgopolous, who is the founder and the owner and attorney at Harmony Law Firm. Areti is a graduate of University of Minnesota Law School and is also an adjunct professor there, where she runs the employment law clinic. And Areti has lots of experience with the unemployment process. In her practice, Areti works with small businesses and employees both on a whole variety of employment-related issues. We're really excited to have her with us here today. We also have with us attorney Lindsey Krause. Lindsey is a graduate of the law school as well, and she's an adjunct professor there in the Law and Practice program. Lindsey works at Nichols Kaster and represents employees in all facets of employment-related issues, and also has experience with the unemployment process, so we're delighted to have her as well. The two students we have presenting for you today are Garrett Prehatney and Matthew Messerli. Garrett is a third-year student. Matthew is a second-year student. Both Garrett and Matthew are corporate externs this summer. We're doing a project with Springboard for the Arts, and they have been gracious enough to give their time and attention to this project, putting it together for you all under the umbrella of our Corporate Institute Practice Scholars Series. We gave it a nice fancy title. So without any further introduction, I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Garrett and Matthew.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Unemployment Insurance in Uncertain Times. I'm Garrett, and I'm going to be leading the first part here. So welcome, everybody. Before we get started, I just want to let you know I do tend to have some anxiety around presentations. So if I'm nervous, please just bear with me. And also, I'd like to warn you, there are some dogs at my house that do randomly just start barking at nothing. So I'd like to just warn you ahead of time that we may run in that if you hear barking, that's what it is. Next slide, please. All right, so first, just take a brief look at what we're going to talk about today. There are 8 main areas that we're going to touch on. We'll briefly do a quick overview of history of unemployment. For those of you that hate history, don't worry, this is only going to be very short, maybe like 15 seconds. If you love history, you're just out of luck. Next, the areas where we're going to spend a little more time on will be what is unemployment. We'll look at what regular unemployment insurance is, as well as some of the new federal programs that have come about due to the pandemic. Then Matthew is going to talk a little bit about the shared work program in Minnesota and who is eligible for unemployment benefits. He's also going to touch on how to apply. And then the last area that we're going to really cover is going to be appeals after the application decision. And then we do have just some takeaways for you and additional resources that we're going to provide at the end. Next slide, please. Okay, so for a brief overview, the first unemployment insurance program in the US was actually created in Wisconsin, so in our neighbor state here. In 1932, it originally provided benefits for 10 weeks. The federal government ended up encouraging the rest of the states to set up their own unemployment programs through the Social Security Act of 1935. So today we have more than 50 unemployment programs in the US. Each state has its own program, and then the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and the US Virgin Islands all have their own programs as well. One of the most important things to note here is because each program is different and varies state to state, the benefits and the requirements are all going to vary wherever you go by state as well. And the basic purpose of unemployment benefits is really just to help workers be able to meet their needs and provide for their families while they're trying to find new employment, and give them the money that they need to survive while they're looking for a new job. Now, I do want to mention that, as you can see, the first program was 1932. The last big pandemic we had in the US was during the 1918 flu. So back then they didn't have unemployment like we do today. So I think we can all be grateful that things are different. We do have the programs available to us now that they didn't have during the last big pandemic in this country. All right, next slide, please. All right, so what is unemployment insurance? Well, unemployment insurance is actually an umbrella that covers various different programs. And some of the ones we're going to talk about were just introduced recently through the CARES Act in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The main programs we're going to take a look at today are regular unemployment insurance, which is what most people probably think of when they refer to unemployment. We're also going to look at some of the federal programs, including the new Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. And then we're also going to take a look at the Minnesota Shared Work Unemployment Program. All right, next slide, please. All right, so regular unemployment insurance, or basic unemployment, is a temporary program that's meant to provide a partial wage replacement to workers that are unemployed through no fault of their own. Now, no fault of their own is important. That's something that we'll go into a little bit later on. But also, it's not meant to provide a full wage replacement. Now, in Minnesota, it tends to usually provide about 50% of a worker's weekly wage. There is a state maximum of $740 a week that it will not go over. Now, with the additional $600 payment that we're going to talk about a little bit later, many workers have been getting closer to 100% or maybe even more than 100% of their normal wages. But traditionally, it's only about 50% that it makes up for. Normal unemployment benefits in Minnesota last for up to 26 weeks, although there are now additional programs that do allow for longer benefit periods, which we'll talk about. And you don't necessarily have to be completely unemployed or fired in order to get unemployment benefits. Workers that have simply had their hours reduced but not laid off and are still working can also qualify for unemployment benefits. So that's something important to note as well. Next slide, please. With the new federal programs that were introduced by the CARES Act, there's really three main programs that we're going to look at. They are the Pandemic Extended Unemployment Compensation, or PEUC, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, or PUA, and the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, or FPUC. As you can see on the slide here, the PEUC, or the Extended Unemployment Compensation, allows for a 13-week extension on benefits for employees that have exhausted their normal benefits. The Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, or PUA program, provides benefits for workers that are not eligible for regular unemployment. So this one is really important for self-employed and other workers that don't qualify for traditional benefits. They may be able to get unemployment assistance under the PUA program. And then the final main federal program we're going to look at is the FPUC, which is the one that provides the extra $600 weekly payment. Next slide, please. All right, so the first one, the Pandemic Extended Unemployment Compensation, is fairly simple. It just extends the benefits workers can get after they've exhausted their regular unemployment benefits by up to 13 weeks. Now, in Minnesota, the PEUC extension does require a separate application after regular benefits have been exhausted. So it's not an automatic program. You don't just get it. If you're on regular unemployment and you exhaust your benefits, you actually do need to then go and apply with the state. And there is a link here on the presentation that you can follow to get to the application. The benefits, the extended benefits are from March 29th of this year through December 26th is the period that those apply. And you do still have to go in and file a weekly claim for benefits, just like you do for regular unemployment benefits. It's the same amount as the regular benefit, so the amount doesn't change. One thing to note for these is if you're self-employed and you don't qualify for regular unemployment benefits, then you are also not going to qualify for the extended unemployment compensation. So these are only available if you are on regular unemployment benefits. All right, next slide, please. All right, so the next main program is the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. Now, this one has been pretty major for self-employed individuals who are normally not eligible for unemployment benefits. This program gives up to 39 weeks of special benefits to workers who cannot get regular unemployment or extended benefits. It expanded eligibility to cover independent contractors, Gig workers, so people who do Uber or DoorDash, Instacart, people who are seeking part-time employment or working part-time, and individuals who just don't have sufficient work history to qualify for traditional unemployment benefits. In Minnesota, they made it fairly easy. There's no separate application for the pandemic unemployment assistance. I just want you to complete the regular unemployment application. And if the state determines you're not eligible for either regular or extended benefits, then they're automatically going to review your application to see if you would qualify for the pandemic unemployment assistance. When you apply for this, you do have to self-certify that you're able and available to work, that you're unemployed or partially employed, or if you're unable or unavailable to work due to a COVID-19 situation. If you are on regular unemployment benefits, you exhaust those, and then you also exhaust the 13 weeks of the additional PEUC benefits that we just talked about. You may then be eligible for PUA benefits if you have exhausted your other benefits in fewer than 39 weeks. So this program won't allow you to receive benefits longer than 39 weeks, but if you've already exhausted those other programs and it has been less than 39 weeks, you may then be able to get benefits under this program as well. All right, next slide, please. And then the last main federal program we're going to touch on is the FPUC, the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation. And this is the one that I would imagine most people seem to be most familiar with that I've talked to. It's one where you automatically receive an extra $600 unemployment compensation payment. And that's if you're eligible for any of the unemployment benefit programs. You just automatically get that payment. You don't have to submit any separate payment request. And that payment was effective beginning March 29th through the week ending July 25th. So this program is going to be ending fairly soon here. Congress is currently working on extending the benefit, but at this time, it's uncertain if they're going to be extending this program or not. If this program is not extended, there are other ones Congress is looking at. So at this point, it's just unclear what's going to happen as far as any additional compensation. But it is a possibility that other programs could be introduced even if this one is not. And then one other thing to note is just that it's done as an additional payment or as a separate deposit. Sorry, the dogs are barking. Don't know if you can hear that or not. But those are the main federal programs. Before we move on to the shared work program and dig into that a little bit, I just want to check and see, Areti or Lindsey, did you have anything you want to add on what we've covered so far with just regular unemployment or the federal programs?
I think you covered it well. I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Well, at this point then, I'm going to go ahead and we'll turn it over to Matthew and we'll move on to the shared work stuff.
Next slide, please. So my name is Matthew Messerli. I'll be taking over for this portion of the presentation. Just to start, shared work is a state program, state level program. It's a run out of the Employment Insurance Division that lets employers spread reduced work hours among a group of employees instead of laying off a portion of those employees. These employees may then be eligible to get partial unemployment benefits to help make up some of the difference in their income as long as they are working the reduced schedule in accordance with the the program's agreement. The program overall provides an opportunity for employers to protect employees from layoffs and maintain workforce cohesion, while also avoiding substantial costs in the future for retraining and rehiring employees when the economy recovers. Next slide, please. So just to go over some of the benefits and drawbacks of shared work quick. As far as benefits, the chief one is to keep experienced and trained staff on by avoiding layoffs, as well as to avoid future hiring and training costs. Additionally, you can by participating in the program, you can avoid the lengthy onboarding process when business conditions improve for new employees. Further, you can maintain financial stability within the workforce community at large, as well as the Payment Protection Program has requirements for retaining employees, and so this program can help you qualify for that. A couple of the drawbacks of the program are that you do need to apply. You will be maintaining responsibility for the employees as the employee's informational contact on behalf of the program, and you are entering into a binding contract with the state, which would require notification of the state and approval for any changes, which we'll discuss in detail later. Lastly, you cannot reduce employee benefits as part of this program. You will need to provide full benefits or unchanged benefits for the employees that participate in the program. Next slide, please. So just to go over some of the required information for filling out the application quickly, you'll need to know, we have a checklist here. You'll need to know your MNUI employer account number, your contact information as a business. So this would be your address, your business phone number, and so on. You also want to know your business's provided product or service, as well as employee information for all the employees affected. So this includes the number of employees that will be affected, the employee names, their normal work hours, as well as their proposed new hours, and their social security numbers. Next slide, please. So the main reason to apply is to retain employees and prevent layoffs, and with all the benefits that effort would grant you. The employees that would be eligible for this program are only those who are full-time or regular part-time employees who have been employed with you for the last year, or for at least a year. So this doesn't apply to seasonal workers and workers like that. Additionally, you would need to apply by noon Wednesday, at least 2 weeks prior to your proposed start date. And you'll need to fill out a short application form and a participant worksheet. The form is about 2 pages long. It's mostly answerable by the information under the checklist on the previous slide. And the participant worksheet is an Excel document that looks like the one on screen shown. So you just fill it out. It's more or less intuitive, but there is a helpline for if you have any questions. Next slide, please. So just some common hangups and questions that people have. The employees covered need to reflect the hours of at least one full-time position. So if you have 5 employees who you reduce hours on, you would need to reduce hours by 8 for each of those employees to match up to the amount of a full-time position for 40 hours a week. So if you had 5 employees employed at 40 hours a week, they would need to all go down to 32. Additionally, the primary contact will be shared.work at state.mn.us. They would be the ones you would need to notify as well as to contact for any questions. The program is also, once again, a binding contract between the employer and the Unemployment Insurance Division. So you would need to notify and obtain approval to change participant hours, to add or remove participants, to add a uniform shutdown for your business, to modify the end date of the plan, or to cancel the plan. And lastly, for the employees, they would need to apply for unemployment as normal to receive compensation under this program. Next slide, please. So just to go over what both sides of a shared work agreement can expect after the application process, employees would need to apply for unemployment insurance benefits and request payment for each week that they work those reduced hours under the agreement. They should be eligible for benefits each week they work a total of 32 hours or fewer. And the benefit amounts they will receive are usually about 1/2 of the lost income due to reduced hours, up to the maximum benefit allowed by law. Employers, on the other hand, will need to submit the application and amend as necessary with ongoing contact with the program. As far as effects on UI accounts, if you're an experience rated employer, your future experience rating will be reduced proportionally as it relates to layoffs. So if you have 5 employees who reduce by 20% each as far as hours worked, that will count as a full layoff. If you're a reimbursing employer, we would be billed quarterly for the shared work benefits paid in the previous quarter. Next slide, please. So to get back to regular unemployment here,
Hey, Matthew, can I just interrupt? And before we move on from shared work, because that's a good chunk of information, I'm hoping we can just pause again and see Lindsey or Areti, do you have anything else you wanted to add about the shared work program?
This is Lindsey, not specifically, although I will say just, from experience, I do, know that both employers and employees that I've talked to in my practice and in my personal life are interested in this program, and I think are really, looking for ways to take advantage. But I know there are also some, quite a few questions just surrounding it because it can be confusing. But I think it can be a great way for, companies who are struggling with what to do with, valuable parts of their workforce, but still not being able to, employ them all at a full-time basis, that this is a great option.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And Areti, actually, we have a couple of questions in the chat bar. So Matthew, if you don't mind, we'll just tackle a few of these kind of as we go. So one of the questions is, can part-time employees who have had their hours reduced apply? At least that's how I'm understanding this question. Areti, Lindsey, any thoughts on that particular question?
Sure, I can answer that pretty briefly. Yes, part-time employees can apply. The students will cover this in their presentation some more, but as the current slide shows, as long as you're working less than 32 hours a week and making less than your weekly benefit amount, and you meet other eligibility requirements, you can apply and receive unemployment benefits.
Wonderful, thank you. We have one additional question since you're on the line, Areti.
Sure.
So we have a person or a company, it says, I'm self-employed, but they continue to get a message saying their estimate is $0. They haven't received any payment. That strikes me as potentially a sort of a specific question that might need some more details teased out. Any initial thoughts, though, on what might be happening that you could share with the group?
I would say if you can log into your online account and navigate to the determination and issue summary page, look at any issues that are listed there and see what their status is. If it says pending, as long as something's pending, you won't be receiving, normally you won't receive benefits until it's completed. If it says completed, just click on the issue ID number and it should give you a little more information. This, again, the presenters will cover this momentarily, but anytime there's a determination made about your eligibility status, you should receive a notice in the mail and should also be available online regarding your eligibility, and that will give you more specific information. But if you're just waiting for benefits, check and see if the status is still pending. That might be it. It just hasn't been completed.
Wonderful. And that's a good segue to turn it back over to you, Matthew, to continue to talk about some of these programs. Go ahead.
Gladly. So just to go back to regular unemployment insurance benefits, as far as who's eligible, the best way to determine your eligibility is to apply. The state really hammers that home, and I'd like to as well. The best way is generally to apply. Additionally, normal eligibility requirements include working less than 32 hours of service a week, making less than the weekly benefit amount, being able to work, being available for suitable employment, and to actively seek employment. Due to COVID-19, eligibility has been expanded to include employees adversely affected by COVID-19 or related circumstances. Next slide, please. So just to dig a bit more into normal eligibility, individuals may be eligible for weeks that they have filed a request for employment, worked fewer than 32 hours of service, and their payment was less than their benefit amount, were available for suitable employment, were actively seeking employment, and were able to work. Generally, individuals could be ineligible for benefits if they have an outstanding misrepresentation or balance, fail to provide required information, quit unemployment without a justifying exception, or were discharged due to misconduct. Next slide, please. Due to the pandemic, the eligibility for unemployment has been expanded. Specifically, just as a broad rule so far, the Executive Order 2005 has suspended strict compliance with Chapter 216, which is the governing chapter for unemployment insurance benefits provided by the state. Specific changes to employees include that employees who have lost employment or work reduced hours due to COVID-19, employees who have suspended employment due to a healthcare professional's recommendation, or have been ordered to not to return to work due to an outbreak, or have experienced childcare disruptions related to COVID-19. All of those could be eligible thanks under the new rules under the pandemic. If you're a self-employed or independent contractor and previously self-elected for unemployment insurance coverage, then you're likely eligible for unemployment insurance. Additionally, you may be eligible for PEUC benefits as determined by the state. Next slide, please. So as far as actually applying for unemployment insurance, we highly recommend applying online just because that's where all of the resources are centralized. But there you are able to apply on over the phone using the numbers on screen. These are also all available online. The website link that will be also in the slides provided has a variety of comprehensive resources related to this process, and links to some of those have also been included at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So just as a broad checklist for the process, be sure to apply as soon as you're unemployed or otherwise able to. Be sure to continue looking for work and be ready to accept it if it comes or you receive an offer. Be sure to request a benefit payment each week until you return to work full time. Make sure that you respond to all requests for information from the Unemployment Insurance Division. Be sure to keep the address on your account updated for at least 4 years after your last request for a benefit payment. Make sure that you report any hours worked and any income earned weekly. And feel free to call the UI customer service if you have any questions. Those numbers are available on their website as well. Next slide, please. So just to get back to self-employed applicants, if you are a self-employed applicant, be sure to only report employers as companies you receive a W-2 from. So this doesn't include companies you've been independently contracted by or received 1099s from. And for income-related information for these individuals, you'll generally want to use the same documents as you would for your taxes. Again, if you have questions, feel free to call the state UI line for what would count as work or income. And then I guess if there are more questions, this would be a good time to take a break and answer those.
Good thinking, Matthew. Thanks for noticing that. So let me scroll back up to the first question. One of the questions, and Areti, I think I'm going to address this one to you because we talked about it before. The question is, it's been said that employees on UI due to COVID won't change the employer rating account for insurance costs. Is that ongoing? Should we expect that to change at some point in the near future? Any thoughts on that?
Yes, my understanding is that if one of your employees receives unemployment insurance because of a COVID-related reason, you as an employer will not be charged on your account, and that should not change as long as that's the reason they're on unemployment insurance. If they're on unemployment insurance because of COVID and then they later quit or are discharged, that could change the status of the reason for receiving benefits, and it could affect whether you'll be charged. You will also always be notified if there's a change through a determination of eligibility or ineligibility, and then you can proceed from there.
And I think this question kind of goes along with what you just said, which is, does that answer change at all if we're talking about layoffs? It says, how would layoffs due to the pandemic impact future unemployment insurance rates for the employer?
It's a great question. I mean, I will preface my answer by saying that this is an evolving area of law. So what I am able to tell you today is what I know as of today, and that may change. So I can't really predict the future, but I can tell you that if people are not able to work because of a COVID-related reason, and again, I think this was covered in the presentation, but it's also a good resource is the DEED website, Department of Employment and Economic Development. They do have a lot of information on their website, which is updated daily, I've been told, about this. But my understanding is if it's a COVID-related reason, you will not be charged on the account.
Wonderful, thank you. Lindsey, we have a couple questions here that are coming at it somewhat from the individual's standpoint. So the first question is, if you are the owner of an S Corp, let's see if I'm reading this right. If you're the owner of an S Corp, are you eligible for unemployment benefits if your business has been affected by COVID?
You know, that, and I apologize, I'll probably defer to Areti on that as well. A lot of my clients that I generally work at from an, unemployment perspective are generally not self-employed or owners of a company or an S Corp. So Areti, if you have any information on that, I'll happily defer to you.
It's a good question. I may need a little more information here, which we may not have time for, but I think if you're asking whether if you're an independent worker, I'm not sure if you're asking if you as an individual can apply for benefits because, even if you own an S Corp or not, I'm not sure. I think the simplest answer is either check the DEED website or apply and see what happens. I'm not sure to answer that question.
If there's one takeaway, I would agree with you entirely. Go ahead and apply and let the programs kind of gatekeep and give you more information about how they're looking at things. I think that's a really good suggestion. All right, well, we do have some more questions, but being mindful of the rest of the slides that the students wanted to get through, let's go ahead and turn it back to you, Matthew and Garrett. And for the audience and attendees to just know, we will have some time at the end for additional questions and answers.
Okay, great. Thanks, Emily. Next slide, please. All right, so you went online, you applied, you got your determination, and you don't like the decision, so now it's time to appeal. If either the employee or the employer disagrees with the benefit decision, then you do have the right to file an appeal. And you can do that either online, by mail, or by fax. You do have to file the appeal within the deadline listed on the termination, which should be 20 days after it was issued. Now, by filing the appeal, you are requesting to have a hearing, and the hearings are being done by telephone. If you file and request the appeal, then they're going to send out a hearing guide and a notice of the hearing that will have more details about the hearing process. The hearing process itself is outside the scope of this presentation, but just know that the state will provide you more information on that. Now, if you do schedule an appeal, it's very important that you participate in it. If you do not show up, then the unemployment law judge may just dismiss the appeal and you would automatically lose if you don't show up. After the hearing or after the decision of the unemployment law judge, then you can request a reconsideration. Now, that reconsideration is done by the same judge that issued the hearing decision. So that is the next step in the process. And then after the reconsideration, you can take that decision then, if you still disagree, before the Minnesota Court of Appeals. And I think at that point, you probably want to reach out and get in touch with the lawyer if you don't have one already, just since that is then transitioning out of the unemployment process into the normal Court of Appeals. Next slide, please. Okay, so for individuals, we do have a link to the Minnesota website where it covers the appeal process, and you'd be able to go to get that started. Employees, they often appeal if they have already been denied benefits. They essentially have nothing to lose by appealing. Some reasons employees may not appeal is if the employee agrees with the decision, benefits the reason benefits were denied, thinks it was a valid decision, so they don't want to appeal it, or if the employee just doesn't want to go through the process of attending the telephone hearing and dealing with the unemployment law judge. Those could be a few reasons that employees may not want to appeal, but otherwise, you've already been denied benefits, so there's not really a lot to lose there for the employee individual perspective. If you are going to appeal, that's your chance to present your side of the case to the state. So you'll want to make sure you're organized and present why you think the state was wrong in order to deny your benefits. You want to educate yourself on the state eligibility requirements, which they have a lot of information on the unemployment website. So it'd be a great place to read through and get familiar on that. And then you'll want to gather any evidence to explain your situation if that applies. Again, make sure you pay attention to the deadline. If you don't show up at the hearing, then you're likely to lose. And then you do get a chance to review your file and the notice stating why you were denied benefits before the hearing. So you'll have a chance to prepare for that. Just make sure if your employer is fighting the decision, you're prepared to counter their allegations, whatever it is your employer is saying. So if they're saying you're not eligible because you were fired for misconduct, just make sure you can provide evidence if possible to show why it was not misconduct, for example. Next slide, please. All right, so appeals for employers, we also have a link here for employers to follow to the Minnesota State website that has information on the process. Now, employers may incur a penalty if they appeal a decision related to COVID-19, as the pandemic-related assistance is not paid from the employer's account. So that's a reason an employer may not want to appeal a decision. You'll want to make sure you take a look at that. Also, some other things an employer may want to consider is what they would be taxed and what the impact on the account would be if they don't appeal the decision. Is it going to change? Is it worth dealing with the appeals process and having to go through that? So the amount of unemployment tax is generally based on the number of unemployment claims in their account. So it may or may not be affected. So that's something you'd want to look at. Another reason an employer may want to appeal is if they simply believe that the employee should not be eligible for the unemployment benefits, then the employer may want to contest or challenge the claim. And it's important to make sure you're giving accurate and detailed information if you are going to appeal. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so some of the main points that we would like to make sure that you get from this is, number one, just apply as soon as possible. If you are thinking of applying at all, then you want to make sure that you're not missing out on benefits, or some of the programs do run out like the extra $600. So just apply as soon as you can. And the best way to know what and if you qualify for any of the programs is just to apply at this point. The rest is handled by Minnesota. So if you're wondering or you have questions and you can't figure out, just go ahead and apply. Make sure you're providing honest information, and the state will determine what, if any, programs you are eligible for. For employers, a great way to keep your employees and prevent layoffs is by using the shared work program. So that's a great program to look at doing. And then finally, just do your best. The state's having just as much difficulty as everyone else dealing with the pandemic and all the applications they're receiving. And they're trying to figure out things as they go for some of this. So just do your best too, and we'll all manage to get through this together. Next slide, please. All right, so here we have some additional resources that we provided. We have some links, unemployment resources, at the top there. We have the applicant login where you would go if you want to apply online. We have an applicant information handbook, which has a lot of information on the process. And then we did link to a step-by-step guide for actually completing the application for self-employed and contract workers. So that'll walk you through it. It's very detailed and it goes over the questions that are asked in the application. And I think it flags the ones that you want to make sure you're answering a certain way if you are self-employed. So that's a good resource to use. We have some community services and financial assistance resources. The first one there links to the unemployment website. They have a whole page of resources that you can check out. The VLN, Volunteer Lawyers Network, that is income-based program. You can get help from attorneys there. If you need assistance with unemployment, you may qualify to work with them. Otherwise, the law school does have the unemployment clinic as well. So we've linked the email address for that. So you can email them with questions or to see if they would potentially be able to help work with you. For the shared work program, we have the landing page or the main page for that program at the top there. So if that's something that you're interested in, that's a great place to start. We also link to the application that you would need to fill out and the participant list instructions. So those are the things that you would need to submit. And then again, the main contact for that program with any questions or to apply is the shared work state email address there. Next slide, please. All right, and at this time, we'll go ahead and we'll open it up for any additional questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Garrett. Thank you so much, Matthew. Great job, by the way. And before we take some of these questions in the chat bar and see if any other folks have some they want to add, I just wanted to pause and check in again with Lindsey and Areti to see if you had anything else you kind of wanted to add to the discussion, anything you wanted to emphasize or add.
I'll just say quickly, this is Lindsey. The notion of, especially for, employees, and if you're not sure, the default is apply and see what happens. That's kind of what we encourage all of our clients to do. If they have any concerns about eligibility, it just makes sense to apply. And I think the same goes too for employees to appeal as well. A lot of times, especially maybe if there was some contention in an employee separating from an employer, the initial determination of, reason for a termination, the employer might have, at least in the employee's opinion, over exaggerated something or something of the like. And I think it's always just a fair thing to, state your case and to try to push it as far as you can, because as an employee, especially, you really don't have much to lose.
Excellent. Thank you. Areti, how about you? Anything else that you wanted to add or emphasize?
Maybe just a couple things. One is, to the extent people are working part-time or receiving money, any source of income does need to be reported. So, there's been a lot of confusion to people I've talked to about, am I still eligible? If I get a part-time job, but it's temporary and I lose the job, can I go back on unemployment? As long as you have money in your unemployment insurance account and you still have, you meet eligibility requirements, you can reactivate an account if it goes dormant because you get a job or you're just making more or working more hours than would allow you to receive benefits. So that was one thing I just wanted to mention. The other thing was, there have been a lot of questions relating to COVID and a lot of employees who may not want to return to work and employers who are, in some cases, struggling to get their workforce back. When it comes to unemployment benefits, again, if they are refusing to work for one of the enumerated COVID-related reasons, I'm sorry, not refusing, but they can't return to work, then they may continue to receive benefits. But that doesn't apply to everyone who says they don't want to work because of COVID. So usually you have to show that either a healthcare professional or authority recommended or ordered you to stay home and basically not interact with people. So this is people who may have underlying health conditions or may have been exposed to COVID and are experiencing quarantine. But it's not as broad as some people might like, some workers might like it to be, and employers can still ask for people to come back to work, assuming they are providing a safe workplace. And that is beyond the scope of this presentation, but just so you know, employers have a right to bring their workforce back if the workplace is safe and complying with guidelines from the Minnesota Department of Health and the CDC and other such agencies. But again, in some cases, workers have a right to not come to work, or at least to receive benefits if they don't come to work.
That's helpful. Thank you. So Lindsey and Areti, we have a number of questions. I'm just gonna read them out, and if you have an answer, just go ahead and jump in with it rather than directing to one or the other of you. So the first question we have, and now my chat bar is freezing up. Okay, so let's start with the second question. Can someone collect unemployment because they are self-quarantining for 14 days due to COVID?
I can answer that just briefly. It kind of piggybacks on what I just said. If a healthcare professional or authority has recommended or ordered them to not go to work for COVID-related reasons, then yes, they can still receive benefits in those cases. If they just decide to stay home, it's really not enough. They need a health authority to weigh in, basically.
Excellent, thank you. What about for workers who maybe worked more than full-time before all of this started? Let's say worked full-time and had an additional part-time job, lost the part-time job, but still are working full-time. Are they able to apply for unemployment to kind of recover some of what they lost?
This goes back to the basic eligibility requirements. If you're working less than 32 hours a week and making less than your weekly benefit amount, you can be eligible for benefits. So I'm assuming if this person has a full-time job that continues, they're not going to be eligible for benefits, regardless of previous jobs.
That is helpful, thank you. All right, this next question has to do with the Paycheck Protection Program, which is another one of these new CARES Act programs. And to kind of piggyback on your earlier point, Areti, this is all new for everyone. And so it's kind of unfolding in real time. But this person says, if you're self-employed and receive a PPP loan, how does the loan amount need to be reported on the weekly certifications? So should it be allocated over several weeks? Should you certify it all at once? Any thoughts on that?
You want to take this one, Lindsey?
I don't actually know the answer to that one. I can say I know the answer to the last question that I see on the chat bar, which will be a small win for me, but.
Okay, I'm going to leave that one to you. You know, this is a great question. I guess this might be beyond the scope of our presentation today. It would depend, I guess, on when you receive. I mean, traditionally with unemployment, you are reporting income when you know that it's going to be received or that it's been earned. So I'm guessing that's how, you know, you'd be expected to report it on the PPP loan. I don't know if you get it as a lump sum or you're getting it in payments. That'd be actually a good thing to see if the deed website addresses. It's a great question. I just know that you would need to report it because it would be income. Now, how and when is a little bit unclear to me.
So this next question, I will also ask Garrett and Matthew in case you came across this in your research. Does anyone know if Wisconsin does have a shared work program?
I believe they have an analogous program. I would have to look into that more.
Okay. Good enough. So worth looking into for the person who asked that question.
They do. This is Lindsey. They do. It's very similar to Minnesota. We've had a few sort of potentials ask questions about Wisconsin. Sometimes we'll get a few. So yes, they do.
Excellent. Thank you, Lindsey. All right. So let's see. We have a question here that says, is there a limitation on employee benefits for those who work for a family business when they don't have any ownership themselves? So does this analysis change if your employer is a family business and you are related?
Not to my knowledge. It could be an esoteric part of unemployment law, though. That's not coming to mind. I believe there's a question on the application for unemployment benefits that may ask if you have any ownership in the company. You would just have to answer truthfully and see if that would affect your eligibility. I would think you'd be treated as any other employee. I think the real difference is whether you have ownership or not. But again, there may be some other provision that applies.
Wonderful, thank you. Lindsay, is this the question you were referring to? So I'll just read it in case anyone can't see on their screen, and then you go for it. It says, say I had an employee quit in March for a new job. They were then laid off from this new job because of COVID. My company is now paying unemployment for them because we paid them 100% in their base period. Oh my goodness. Why should we pay since we are not the company that laid off this employee? Did you want to take this one?
That wasn't it, but
all right, well then, surprise.
You know, I and this is just going to make me sound like I have not done any of this. I promise I have done some, but I have not run into that particular situation, at least from the, running into issues on the employer side of being put in a position to pay, for an employee that was recently let go from another business after leaving.
Okay.
I can address briefly. I believe this is an exception under the law where, so normally if an employee quits employment, they're ineligible for benefits presumptively under the law, but there are some exceptions that apply. I believe this relates to an exception if the employee quits one employment and leaves to have kind of this for same or better working conditions and works like, I think it's less than 30 days in the next employment, they can draw benefits based on the original employment, especially if they lose, the second job involuntarily. So I'm guessing that's what's applying here. It's, again, standard unemployment law. The why is a good question, I get, because the legislature decided that's how it should go, I guess.
All right, so we have a question here that says, and I also just want to pause for a moment and be mindful of all of our time. We've got about 5 minutes left. So we'll get through the questions that we have on the screen. If you have one you've been sitting on and you want to go ahead and type it up, we'll see if we can get to it as well. All right, so to the panelists, whoever wants to jump in on this one, the question is, we've heard of employees applying for benefits because of reduced hours, but getting denied even though their hours were only 20 to 30 hours per week. Why would that be, and should they appeal? I mean, to the best as you can kind of gather from the question, anybody want to take a shot at that?
I'm going to assume it's because they're making more than their weekly benefit amount.
Right.
So you need those two, you need to satisfy both requirements. Number one, you're working less than 32 hours, and number two, you're making less than your weekly benefit amount.
All right, good information. So then same person has a somewhat different question, which is, if someone had been receiving benefits and then they go back to full-time for just 1 week, basically, how long do you go back to full-time work before your account gets closed? Is there any waiting time before you can reapply if you are re-furloughed or laid off?
The account doesn't get closed. If you don't request benefits for 3 weeks, then I think it's 3 weeks and it will go inactive. And you can reactivate it at any time. So, or, if you just work full-time 1 week, you can, and you meet eligibility requirements the following week, you can just request for that week. So eligibility, once you've cleared the issue of separation from employment, if you're eligible based on separation from employment, then eligibility goes to a week-by-week analysis. So yeah, assuming you still have money in your benefit account. So basically you can reactivate it any time. If it's gone inactive and you reactivate, you'll have to answer some additional questions to provide information on employment about your work history during the dormant time. But your account, again, can just be restarted, basically. Reactivated is the term.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's going to just about do it for us today. It's a good moment to pause, and we've gotten through all of the questions that were on the chat bar. Thank you so much, Areti. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Matthew and Garrett, you did a great job. I will turn it back over to you, Michael, if there was anything else you wanted to add.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you to Emily, Lindsey, and Areti, as well as to our presenters, Matthew and Garrett. In addition to the great resources that were mentioned and the information in this presentation, the Minnesota SBA has great resource partners that can help you navigate other small business questions that you might have. And that can range from starting up a business to preparing a business statement or a business plan. They can also just serve as a great expert to have in your corner as you navigate these kinds of questions. There are 9 small business development centers that cover the state, as well as SCORE, which has chapters throughout the Twin Cities and throughout the state. They all have mentors that are ready to provide you with the assistance and on one-on-one advice with any of your questions. There are also 3 women business centers in the Twin Cities, Duluth, and Little Falls that cover the state, and they can be a great resource for any women entrepreneurs or CEOs with business questions. Finally, there's also the regional veterans business centers that connect with veterans with small business resources. We're working hard to make sure that we're giving you up-to-date information on new resources. You can stay up to date and connected by subscribing to our newsletter at sba.gov/updates. Please type in your zip code so that we can share resources and information from partners that are local to you. Thank you again to our presenters, and thank you for everyone that has joined us today. This wraps up the session on unemployment with the University of Minnesota Law School. Have a good afternoon.